My name's Leonard Koscianski. I'm an artist. This is my studio. Welcome to my studio. I was told that at the beginning of a video, I'm supposed to smile to welcome you in. So I'm smiling. I'm not a smiler. But I have to do that now. I'm smiling. No, today, I want to talk to you today about a creative problem that we sometimes run into. And when is it important to put that thing away, put that painting away, turn that painting to the wall or whatever? Because there are times when we are involved in a creative project, okay, and like a painting, and you kind of become unhappy with it, and you're not really sure. Something's wrong with it, but what's wrong? What's wrong with it? And you can become kind of frustrated and even angry about it. And you try this, you try that, and no matter what you do, it just gets worse. And that's when you know that it's time to put it away. I mean, you're tempted to throw it out, but don't. Okay. Obsessing over a painting's flaws or a creative project's flaws are not going to produce a solution. Okay. But still, you try because you can't give it up. You can't let it go. So you turn it upside down. You look at the painting in a mirror. You bring your friends over. You show it to them. You talk to them about it, but nothing works. You just can't figure it out. You start to think that maybe there's no solution to this problem and that the only thing you can do is burn it, throw it away. But don't throw it away because I know you're ready to throw it up. You're ready to rip it up and put it in the trash but don't. No. Because the reason that you may feel conflicted and frustrated is because that deep down, you know that there's real potential in this creative project. Okay. There's a real good idea in there somewhere, but where? Okay. So you need to just relax. Take a deep breath. Or maybe 10 deep breaths. And then, there's this old Zen saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So you kind of have to say that again. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It's an interesting adage. And what it implies is that, when you say the word appear, that implies that you can't force that teacher to appear. You can't force that teacher to come forward. You can just make yourself ready. And then once you've made yourself ready, then the teacher can appear. But it implies that the teacher is unbidden. Okay, and it only appears when you are ready, good and ready. And, well, how do you become ready? What do you do to make yourself ready? Well, what do I do first? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to empty your mind. Okay, and so you have to empty your mind of the problem. But how do I do that when it's right there in front of me and I just can't seem to get away from it? And it's staring right back at me. And it's almost like it's laughing at me, taunting me with my failure. Well, that's when you know you need to put it away. Okay, and you may have to force yourself. I know I do because I hate to give some, I hate to stop. It makes me feel like I've failed. You have a sense of failure. But what you have to do, you have to turn that painting to the wall. If it's a writing project, you have to just take it and stuff it in an envelope and put it in the farthest corner of the farthest closet in your home. And then you forget about it and you get it out of your mind. You don't even think about it, maybe for a year, maybe 2 years. Okay, until it's completely gone and you completely forget about it. And that's not easy for me to do. Okay, it's easy for me to say, but it's not easy for me to do because I want to finish a painting. Okay, once I start, I just keep working on it. I keep trying to solve the problem until I get it finished, and then it's done, and then I move on to the next project. But, putting it away, oh my God, that's hard to do. But that's the only way sometimes that we're going to solve the problem. Okay? If you don't put it away, you're not going to solve your creative problem. And it's, only when enough time has passed and you've completely forgotten about it and that it doesn't bother you anymore. And then you can go and find it and, you turn it around and look at it, pull it back out again, look at it. And sometimes it's at that moment that a solution just pops into your mind. Okay, and the solution may seem really simple and obvious, like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that before? Okay, it seems so easy now, and and that has happened to me, a few times in the past, and why didn't I think of that? Well, the reason that you couldn't think of it is because you needed to see that problem with fresh eyes and with an open mind. And I also, you need to give your creative mind time to work on that problem. Now, when we are wrestling with a problem with our conscious mind, it has a tendency to grow. Okay, it tends to get big. It tends to get huge. And we can't solve the problem just because our mind is so dominated by the problem itself. And then that problem can start to create anxiety. And, and then once we have that sense of anxiety, then that really shuts the creative mind down completely. Okay. And the problem may become so big that it blocks us from seeing any solutions to that problem. Okay, but when we put it away, when we get it out of our mind, when we sort of completely forget about it, then that problem starts to shrink. And it can shrink down to a manageable size, to the point where our creative mind has a chance to work on that problem. And, we can come up with solutions because it's not so huge anymore. The problems themselves aren't so huge. Now, and this is true for so many different kinds of projects, creative projects, whether it's a painting or a piece of music or writing or even a relationship. Okay, if the problem is so vexing that we're getting frustrated and there doesn't seem to be any solution in sight, you have to just put it away and leave it alone and stop obsessing about the problem, because obsessing over the problem is only going to make it worse. Okay, how can we be creative if we're uptight? We can't be. Creativity gives us solutions that just kind of seem to like bubble up from wherever that part of our creative mind is. And so we need to give our mind the space and the time in order to work on a problem, to let those the solutions just come up, bubble up from our creative intelligence. Okay, and because pounding away at it with our conscious mind sometimes only makes it worse and worse and worse, and no solution is in sight, and we're frustrated and upset, and and the painting's laughing at us, saying, I knew you couldn't solve this problem. I hate to admit it, but, sometimes my paintings do talk to me. And sometimes they say good things, sometimes they say not so good things. But, when a creative project is responding, when it seems to be responding to us, that energizes us. Okay. And we want to work on it more, and we get excited about it. But when it's problematic, when it's discouraging, then it just seems to drain the energy out of us, and we just can't seem to come up with a solution. And the harder we try, the more the solution escapes us. It's like a greased pig. It just keeps slipping away from us. The more we try to pursue it, the farther it dances away from us. Whew. Well, let me show you an example of that from my own work. Okay, and just to illustrate what I mean by that in a kind of like a practical way, a very real way. Well, here's a painting that I did several years ago. It's oil on canvas. It's pretty big. It's 66 high by 46 wide, and it was a good painting. I liked it. The gallery was able to place it easily, and that means sell in gallery speak. And I felt like, it's a good idea, but I felt that it had more potential. I felt that I could develop that idea further. So several years later, I decided to try another version of it. And so I began that the way I begin all my paintings, well, by, first doing a drawing, a pen and ink drawing. Here's the pen and ink drawing. And then after I have a nice, what I think is a good pen and ink drawing, then I blow that up to the canvas size. And in this case, it was 42 high by 26 inches wide, oil on canvas. And then after that, then I start to block it in. I block in the darks with a warm black, a burnt umber mixed with black, and kind of like a dark brown. And then the lights I block in with white. And so at this point, I thought, oh, gee, this would be great to use a glaze technique on that illuminated grass, because a glaze technique gives you a more luminous, more glowy kind of enamel-like color. Then you can get painting a la prima. So I thought, well, I'll use the glaze technique on the grass and the illuminated grass. And so how do you do, what do I mean by a glaze technique? Well, first, I underpainted it with pure white, kind of sort of a thickish white. And then I was able to kind of like scrape the texture of the grass into the white. And then I allowed that to dry. And then it was dried completely. Then I was able to glaze thin layers of the desired color over the top of it, creating a kind of a more luminous, glowy color. Okay, and then the painting progressed. I, put in the figure and had the figure looking out of the window, and then I put in the sky, and it was kind of like a stormy, cloudy sky, and then I, finished the painting up, and when I finished it, I looked at it, and I was disappointed. Oh, I felt real disappointment, but I didn't know why. And it wasn't like I just kind of disliked it a little bit. I hated it. It seemed so melodramatic and unconvincing, so phony. And, my paintings are very, they're narrative. They're about me. They're about my life, about, me living here in suburbia. And this just seemed kind of so phony and so not me. And, it was almost kind of cringeworthy. It's just like, I don't know why, but, it was that way. And so I said to myself, well, look, I can improve it. I'll just change the composition around and, experiment a little bit. So I photographed the painting, and then I printed out, several small black and white versions onto a sheet of paper. Here you can see that. And then I began to draw on top of those printed out little thumbnails, biggish thumbnails, and, trying different compositions out. And, so I drew on top of them with a pen and a whiteout pen, and here are the drawings after I'd worked on them and changed the compositions around, and so I looked at them and I chose one, and I said, okay, well, this is going to make it better. Okay, I thought, this is going to make for a really good painting. Okay, so I changed the figure. I made it more relaxed. I had him drinking a cup of coffee. I put a flock of birds up on the roof. Changed the clouds to billowy clouds, and which I thought would be more dramatic and more interesting. And was it better? No. No, it wasn't better. In fact, I hated it even more. It looked so contrived. I couldn't force myself to even work on it. I mean, I go into my studio every morning and I work on my painting. And, this was like pulling teeth. I would go into my studio and it was just so discouraging and it was just so laborious and, oh God, not this thing again. And it was as if the painting was laughing at me. It was taunting me and telling me, that this is a creative failure for you. You've been defeated. Oh my God. Well, I wish that was the point when I needed to turn it away. Turn it to the wall. Stop looking at it. Stop obsessing over that freaking painting. Okay? So I wish I had photographed it at this point, but I didn't. I just have this sketch. This compositional drawing. Because I hated it so much. I couldn't even bear the thought of photographing it, but I wish I had. Because, every step in the creative evolution of something is important. Even when it's really discouraging us, even when we're down in the dumps on a creative project, it's important to kind of record that because that's an important step along the way. And, but I was really bummed out. I mean, oh God. And so, the painting had potential, but the more I worked on it, the worse I got. And, I wish I could show you how bad it was and how bad it got, but, but for some reason I couldn't leave it alone. Even though I hated being in the same room with it, I just kept working on it because I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to feel like I had failed. I didn't know what to do. And, because I never go up on a painting. I always kind of work until they're finished. But then I turned it to the wall. And I know I felt like I was giving up. But, on the other hand, I wanted to burn the darn thing. So, I didn't give up. I calmed down and I took the painting and I took it off the easel, took it out of the studio, went over to a storage room, and I just shoved it into the stack of stuff here. You can see that picture there of the sack of stuff. And then I just forgot about it. I couldn't see it, out of sight, out of mind. I completely forgot about it. And it was there for, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years, until I just completely forgot about it. And then one day when, I had finished something and I was looking to start something new, and what I should do next, I remembered that painting. And I went and got it and pulled it out and put it up on the easel. And, that was the painting that was bothering me so much, the one that seemed so hopeless. Well, when I put it up on the easel, it was like, oh my God, I know what to do now. The solution seemed so obvious. It was so simple. Why didn't I think of it before? Why couldn't I see the solution before? But I couldn't. So what did I do? What was the solution? Well, the first thing I did was I turned the figure around so that it was facing into the house. And it wasn't quite so melodramatic anymore. And then I changed the sky. I made it, like a regular clear night sky with the stars and the moon. And then I reflected some of that light, some of the color of the grass, the illuminated grass, up onto the front of the house, kind of uniting the house with the grass and giving it more of a sense of illumination. And, and then I put a few birds on the lawn. And then it seemed really good. It didn't seem so melodramatic, and the painting wasn't laughing at me anymore. And yeah, my paintings do make fun of me sometimes. But and then I actually used that glaze technique. I used it on the walkway as well. I just took little white dots of paint to give it that pebbly texture, and then I glazed over that with sort of a dark blue-gray. And then I even put a welcome mat there in front of the door. It was as if, while the painting was put away, my creative mind was working on a solution, okay, without me even knowing it, okay? And sometimes when we force a solution, we actually block our creative energy. Our creativity can be stymied by our force of will. And the harder we try to come up with a solution, the worse things get. How many times have we been in that situation in our life where we're faced with a problem with our art or with our business or relationships or music or something, and the harder we try, the worse it gets. The more we pound away at it, the worse it gets. And we can't force a solution sometimes. And if we try, the solution only seems to dance farther away from us. Okay? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. But the teacher can't appear if we're just too busy pounding away at that problem. If the problem has become so huge and so monumental in our own minds that it creates anxiety and, oh God, what do I do next? So we have to give that teacher time and space to appear. We have to back off. And, our creative minds are amazing. Our minds are amazing. And, we have that creative side that can come up with creative solutions if we can force that painting out of our sight, if we can put it away and get it out of our conscious mind. Then our creative mind can actually come to work on that problem and make things better. So once the painting was finished, I varnished it and I framed it, and then I sent it to a gallery, and they liked it so much they actually put it in an art fair. They had it representing the gallery in an art fair. So, it was a successful solution to the problem. But I'm not totally happy. I may do another version. There's a lot of potential in that idea, I think. And, sometimes our simplest ideas, the ideas that we think are the dumbest, are actually the ones that, are the most fruitful. Tchaikovsky hated his 1812 overture. It's one of the simplest compositions he ever made. He absolutely hated it. But, sometimes our simplest ideas are our best ideas, and, and they offer, numerous possibilities. But we have to give our creative mind a chance to work on those possibilities. Our conscious mind can't always come up with a solution. Well, thank you for listening to me talk about this problem, this issue of when do we put things away? When does a problem become so vexing and so frustrating that we just have to actually take that thing and put it away, as hard as that may be, as much as we hate to do it, as much as it might give us a sense of failure, we still have to do it, because it's only then that we will actually be able to come up with a solution. Well, thank you for watching this video.